Bullies put the new kid in a rear naked choke and knock him out. Big mistake. When he woke up, he beat them all up. Ethan Morris slouched in his seat at the back of the classroom, trying to make himself as small as possible. At 15, his lanky frame and unruly brown hair made him stand out despite his best efforts. Being the new kid at Westridge High School was hard enough, but being scrawny and awkward made him an easy target. The bell rang, signaling the end of Mr. Peterson's history class. Ethan gathered his books, slowly, hoping the usual suspects would clear out before he had to navigate the hallway. "Hey, stick boy! Waiting for everyone to leave so you don't snap in half in the hallway?" The taunt came from Derek Walsh, the self-appointed king of the sophomore class. Standing 6 feet tall with the muscular build of a wrestler, Derek had singled out Ethan from day one. Behind him stood his two loyal followers, Jake Simmons, nearly as tall as Derek but leaner, and Trevor Mack, stocky and always eager to impress Derek with increasingly cruel behavior. "Just ignore them. 4 more periods and you're free for the weekend." Ethan kept his eyes down, sliding his last notebook into his backpack. "I asked you a question, new kid." Derek's hand came down hard on Ethan's desk, making him flinch. "I'm just getting my stuff," Ethan mumbled, rising from his seat and slinging his backpack over his shoulder. He tried to step around Derek, but Jake moved to block his path. Mr. Peterson looked up from his desk. "Everything okay back there, gentlemen? You should be heading to your next class." Derek's smile was automatic and convincing. "Yes, sir. Just helping the new kid find his way." "We'll continue this conversation at lunch, stick boy," Derek whispered, bumping Ethan's shoulder hard as he passed by. Ethan watched them leave, rubbing his shoulder. The bruises were starting to collect, but he never fought back. Not because he couldn't. In fact, Ethan had spent 8 years training in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and had earned his brown belt just before the move. His father, a former MMA fighter turned instructor, had trained him personally until they'd relocated for his mother's new job. But Ethan had promised his parents he wouldn't fight at school. His father's fighting career had ended after a bad concussion, and since then both his parents were adamant that fighting was only for self-defense in life-threatening situations or in controlled settings like tournaments. One fight at school could mean expulsion, and with his mother finally landing the hospital administration position they'd moved for, Ethan couldn't risk it. "It's not life-threatening if they just push me around a bit. I can handle it." The cafeteria at Westridge was a large open space with rows of rectangular tables. The social hierarchy was clearly defined by seating arrangements. Athletes and popular kids claimed the center tables, while others gathered in their respective cliques around the periphery. Ethan had no clique. He usually sat alone at the far end near the emergency exit. Today he kept his head down as he walked through the food line, selecting a sandwich, an apple, and a bottle of water. He paid quickly and turned to head for his usual spot. That's when he noticed Derek watching him, whispering something to Jake and Trevor. He made it halfway to his table before he felt something hook his ankle. He stumbled, pitching forward, his lunch tray flying from his hands. The clatter of the tray hitting the floor drew immediate attention. Ethan landed hard on his knees, his water bottle rolling away while his sandwich splayed across the floor. Laughter erupted around him. Looking back, he saw Trevor's extended foot retracting under his table, high-fiving Derek. "Oops," Trevor called out. "Looks like Stick Boy's having trouble staying upright." Ethan's face burned as he scrambled to pick up his scattered lunch. A few students snickered while others pretended not to notice. No one helped. One of the lunch monitors, Mrs. Reeves, finally approached. "What happened here?" "I tripped," Ethan said quietly. Telling would only make things worse. Mrs. Reeves sighed. "Be more careful next time." She walked away to deal with a dispute at another table. Ethan dumped his ruined lunch in the trash and headed for his usual spot, his appetite gone. He sat down and pulled out a book, pretending to read while his mind raced. Just a few more hours, just get through today. From across the cafeteria, someone was watching the scene with interest. Sophia Chen, a junior with straight black hair and sharp eyes, had been noticing the pattern for weeks now. When the final bell rang that afternoon, Ethan rushed to his locker, hoping to get out before Derek and his friends could intercept him. He was shoving books into his backpack when a shadow fell across his locker door. "Leaving so soon, stick boy?" Derek leaned against the adjacent locker, Jake and Trevor flanking him like bodyguards. "We thought you might want to hang out after school." The hallway was clearing out quickly. A few students glanced their way but hurried past. No one wanted to be associated with the target of Derek Walsh's attention. "Seriously, guys, I have to go," Ethan said, trying to step around them. Trevor shoved him back against the lockers. "What's the rush? Got a hot date?" "Oh wait, who would date a twig like you?" "Maybe he's running home to cry to mommy." Jake suggested, grabbing Ethan's backpack and yanking it. Ethan held onto the strap, but Derek stepped in and twisted it out of his grasp. Let's see what Stick Boy's got in here. He unzipped the backpack and started pulling out books, dropping them on the floor one by one. Stop it, Ethan said, his voice stronger now. He bent to pick up his scattered belongings, but Trevor pushed him down. Or what? Derek challenged, holding Ethan's math textbook overhead. What are you going to do about it, new kid? Ethan rose slowly, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. For a moment he considered throwing a punch, picturing exactly how he would take Derek down. He could visualize the exact sequence of moves, but he remembered his promise. Not unless it's life-threatening. This wasn't that. Yet. Just give me my stuff back, Ethan said quietly. Derek seemed disappointed by Ethan's restraint. He dropped the textbook, letting it hit the floor with a loud thud. You're pathetic, he spat. Come on, guys. Stick Boy's not even worth our time. They walked away, leaving Ethan to gather his scattered belongings. As he knelt on the floor, he noticed a pair of sneakers stop beside him. Looking up, he saw Sophia. Those guys are jerks, she said simply, bending down to help him pick up his books. Thanks, he managed. I'm Sophia, she said, handing him his history notebook. You know they only pick on you because you don't fight back. They think you're an easy target. Ethan shoved the last book into his backpack. I'm not going to fight them. Why not? You look like you could handle yourself if you wanted to. He stood up, slinging his backpack over his shoulder. It's complicated, Sophia shrugged. Well, if you ever want someone to sit with in study hall, I'm usually in the back corner. Might be harder for them to bother you if you're not alone. The weekend passed too quickly. Ethan spent Saturday at his father's small martial arts studio, helping with the children's classes in the morning and training privately with his dad in the afternoon. On the mat, executing perfect takedowns and submissions, Ethan felt confident and in control. Everything he wasn't at school. Your armbar. Air's getting sloppy, his father, Mike Morris, commented as they grappled. You're not fully extending. Ethan adjusted his position and retried the move, this time ensuring his hips were properly elevated and his opponent's arm was fully extended before applying pressure. Better, his father nodded, tapping out. Azio. They reset. He studied his son's face. Everything okay at the new school? You seem distracted today. Ethan shrugged. It's fine. Just the usual new kid stuff. Mike Morris knew his son well enough to sense there was more, but he didn't push. Remember what I've always taught you. Martial arts is about discipline and respect, not aggression, Ethan finished. I know, Dad. And? His father raised an eyebrow. Ethan sighed. And we only use our training for self-defense when there's no other option. Mike nodded, satisfied. That's right. But self-defense doesn't just mean when someone's throwing punches. Standing up for yourself can take many forms. By Monday morning, Ethan had almost convinced himself that things might get better. None of those hopes materialized. Well, if it isn't Stick Boy, Derek called out as Ethan walked through the main entrance. Miss us over the weekend? Ethan kept walking, pretending not to hear. He made it as far as the water fountain before Jake stepped in front of him, blocking his path. Derek's talking to you, Jake said, crossing his arms. It's rude to ignore people. I'm just trying to get to class, Ethan said, attempting to step around Jake. Trevor appeared beside him. We've been thinking, Stick Boy. You've been here, what, 3 months? And we still don't know if you can swim. A cold feeling settled in Ethan's stomach. What are you talking about? The third-floor bathrooms need cleaning, Derek said with a malicious grin. And your head is the perfect size for a toilet brush. Before Ethan could react, Jake and Trevor each grabbed one of his arms. They were stronger than they looked, their grips vice-like on his biceps. Derek led the way as they half-dragged, half-pushed Ethan toward the stairwell. Let me go. Ethan struggled, but their combined strength overpowered him. Not life-threatening, he reminded himself as they pushed him up the stairs. Humiliating, but not dangerous. The third-floor bathroom was at the end of a less-traveled hallway. At this early hour, it was empty. Derek pushed the door open, checking that no one was inside before nodding to Jake and Trevor. They shoved Ethan in, letting the door swing shut behind them. Please don't do this, Ethan said, his back against the row of sinks as the 3 boys advanced on him. This is stupid. No. What's stupid is you thinking you can come to our school and not pay your dues, Derek said. Every new kid goes through initiation. You're overdue. They lunged at him together. Ethan managed to dodge the first grab, slipping to the side as Trevor's hands grasped at empty air. But Jake was quick, catching Ethan's arm and twisting it behind his back in an amateur hold that nonetheless was effective due to Jake's superior strength. Got him, Jake announced triumphantly. Derek approached slowly, cracking his knuckles. Hold him tight. I think it's time Stickboy learned who runs this school. Ethan's training kicked in instinctively. He shifted his weight, preparing to execute a hip throw, but before he could complete the move, Trevor grabbed his other arm, and together they forced him toward one of the stalls. "Wait," Ethan started to say, but Derek cut him off with a hard shove to his chest, sending him stumbling backward into the stall. His heel caught the edge of the toilet, and he lost his balance, sitting down hard on the closed lid. "Perfect," Derek grinned, nodding to his friends. "Hold him down." Jake and Trevor tightened their grip on Ethan's arms, pinning them to his sides. Ethan could feel his heart hammering in his chest as Derek reached for the flush handle. "First flush coming up," Derek announced, pushing the handle down. The toilet gurgled beneath Ethan. "We need to get his head wet for a proper cleaning." So Tutan struggled harder now, the realization hitting him that they actually intended to force his head into the toilet. This was crossing a line. "Stop it!" he shouted, hoping someone outside might hear. "Shut him up," Derek ordered. Trevor clamped a hand over Ethan's mouth while Jake maintained his grip on Ethan's arms. Derek bent down to lift the toilet seat, but Ethan wasn't going to let this happen, not anymore. With a sudden burst of strength fueled by anger and adrenaline, Ethan jerked his head backward, connecting solidly with Trevor's nose. Trevor yelped, releasing his hold on Ethan's mouth to clutch at his face. "You little—" Trevor started, blood seeping between his fingers. Ethan took advantage of the momentary distraction to twist in Jake's loosened grip, preparing to break free. But before he could complete the move, Derek's fist connected with his stomach. The air rushed out of Ethan's lungs and he doubled over in pain. "Big mistake," Derek growled, grabbing a fistful of Ethan's hair and yanking his head back. "You want to play rough? Fine, we can play rough." What happened next occurred so fast that Ethan barely had time to process it. Derek moved behind him, wrapping his arm around Ethan's neck in what Ethan immediately recognized as an improperly executed rear naked choke. In a tournament or training setting, Ethan would have easily countered the move. Derek's technique was sloppy, his arm not properly positioned across Ethan's carotid arteries, but with Jake still pinning Ethan's arms and Trevor recovering from the headbutt, Ethan couldn't execute the escape he knew would work. Derek tightened his grip, squeezing Ethan's neck with brute force rather than proper technique. "Not so tough now, are you?" Derek hissed in his ear. Ethan could feel the pressure building in his head as his air supply was cut off. Black spots began to dance in his vision. He bucked and twisted, trying to break free, but Derek only tightened his hold. The black spots expanded, consuming his field of vision. The last thing Ethan heard was Jake saying, "Dude, I think he's passing out," before darkness claimed him completely. Ethan wasn't sure how long he was unconscious. When awareness returned, he was lying on the cold bathroom floor, his head throbbing and his throat burning. He blinked, the fluorescent lights overhead sending spikes of pain through his skull. "Holy shit, he actually passed out." Trevor's voice sounded distant, tinged with panic. "What if he's seriously hurt?" "He's fine." Derek's voice was less certain than his words. "Look, he's waking up. We should get out of here," Jake urged. "If a teacher finds out—" "Shut up," Derek snapped. "No one's going to find out because Stickboy here isn't going to tell anyone. Are you, Ethan?" It was the first time Derek had used his actual name. Ethan pushed himself up to a sitting position, his back against the bathroom stall. The room spun momentarily, then steadied. He looked up at the three boys standing over him, their expressions a mix of continued arrogance and new uncertainty. Something had changed inside Ethan. The darkness, the helplessness of being choked unconscious, had crossed a line he couldn't ignore. This wasn't just bullying anymore. This was assault. This was the life-threatening situation his parents had talked about. This ends now. With deliberate calm, Ethan rose to his feet. The three boys took an instinctive step back, surprised by his steady movement after what had just happened. "You made me pass out," Ethan said, his voice hoarse but even. "You could have killed me." Derek recovered his bravado quickly. "Don't be so dramatic. You were only out for a few seconds." "That's all it takes," Ethan said, something in his tone making the others exchange glances. "A few seconds without oxygen to the brain." He rotated his neck, feeling the tender spots where Derek's arm had pressed. "Whatever," Derek scoffed, though he seemed unnerved by Ethan's calm. "Consider it a lesson. Next time." "There won't be a next time." Ethan cut him off. He took a step forward, and surprisingly, all three boys took another step back. Jake forced a laugh. "Look at Stickboy acting tough after we just laid him out." Ethan's eyes settled on Jake with an intensity that made the taller boy's smirk falter. "You know," Ethan said conversationally, "there's a right way and a wrong way to choke someone out." What Derek did, that was the wrong way. It could cause permanent damage. The right way. He moved with sudden speed, closing the distance between himself and Jake before any of them could react. In one fluid motion, the product of thousands of hours of training, Ethan executed a perfect double-leg takedown, driving his shoulder into Jake's midsection while grabbing both legs and lifting. Jake's feet left the ground and he crashed onto his back, with Ethan maintaining control from the top position. The impact knocked the wind from Jake's lungs. Before he could recover, Ethan transitioned to a mounted position, his knees pinning Jake's arms to the floor while he established a technical control position. "What the?" Trevor started, moving forward with Derek. "Stay back," Ethan warned, and something in his voice made them hesitate. To Jake, who was struggling beneath him, Ethan said quietly, "I could have broken your arm just now, or dislocated your shoulder, or choked you out properly, but I didn't because I have control. That's the difference between us." Jake stopped struggling, his eyes wide with shock and a new emotion, fear. Ethan stood up smoothly, releasing Jake, who scrambled backward across the floor. Trevor and Derek looked between Ethan and their fallen friend, recalculating the situation. "What are you, some kind of karate kid?" Derek asked, but his usual confidence was gone. "Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu," Ethan corrected. "Brown belt. My dad was an MMA fighter. I've been training since I was 7. He rolled his shoulders, settling into a relaxed but ready stance. "I could have fought back any time in the last 3 months. I chose not to." Trevor helped Jake to his feet, both of them watching Ethan warily now. Jake rubbed his back where it had hit the floor. "You're full of crap," he said, but there was no conviction in his voice. "Try me," Ethan invited, his voice still calm. "But know this, I'm done being your punching bag. The next time any of you touch me, I won't hold back." Derek, unwilling to lose face completely, took a step forward. "You think just because you got in one lucky move?" Ethan moved again, this time executing a perfect foot sweep that sent Derek stumbling sideways into the row of sinks. It wasn't a full takedown, just enough to demonstrate that he could have done worse if he wanted to. "That wasn't luck," Ethan said as Derek regained his balance, face flushing with anger and embarrassment. "And neither was this." Without warning, Ethan launched into a combination of strikes and movements that didn't actually connect with any of them, but demonstrated unmistakable skill, the kind that comes from years of dedicated training. His hands moved in precise patterns, feet shifting with perfect balance, body flowing through techniques that left no doubt about his capabilities. He finished by returning to a neutral stance, not even breathing hard. "I could do this all day," he said simply. The bathroom door swung open then, and all 4 boys turned to see Mr. Reynolds, the vice principal, standing in the doorway. His eyes narrowed as he took in the scene, Jake still rubbing his back, Trevor with dried blood beneath his nose, Derek flushed and off balance, and Ethan, composed but clearly in the middle of a confrontation. "What's going on in here, mister?" Reynolds demanded. There was a moment of tense silence. Ethan met Derek's eyes steadily, a silent message passing between them. "Your move." "Nothing, sir," Derek finally said, his voice sullen. "Just talking." Mr. Reynolds didn't look convinced. "All of you should be in class. The warning bell rang 3 minutes ago." "We were just leaving," Ethan said, picking up his backpack from where it had fallen by the sinks. He walked toward the door, and the vice principal stepped aside to let him pass. At the last moment, Ethan turned back to the 3 boys. "See you around," he said, the simple phrase carrying a weight of meaning that only they understood. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Word spread quickly, as it always does in high schools. By lunchtime, the story had transformed through multiple retellings. Some said Ethan had knocked out all 3 boys. Others claimed he was some kind of underground fight club champion. As Ethan entered the cafeteria, he noticed the subtle shift. Students who had previously ignored him now watched him with curiosity. He got his lunch and headed for his usual isolated table, only to find Sophia already sitting there. "Mind if I join you?" she asked as he approached. "Go ahead," he said, sitting down across from her. She studied him for a moment. "So the rumors are true, you took on Derek and his goons?" Ethan shrugged. "Not exactly. I just showed them I could. And apparently that was enough," Sophia said, glancing across the cafeteria where Derek, Jake, and Trevor were huddled at their usual table, noticeably subdued, and occasionally casting wary glances in Ethan's direction. "They've been terrorizing kids for 2 years. No one's ever stood up to them like that." "They went too far," Ethan said simply. He unconsciously rubbed his neck where Derek's arm had pressed. The rest of the week brought a new normal. Derek, Jake, and Trevor gave Ethan a wide berth, crossing to the other side of hallways when they saw him coming. Other students who had previously ignored him now nodded in greeting or even attempted conversation. After the final bell on Friday, Ethan was gathering books from his locker when a familiar figure approached. Derek, alone this time, without his usual backup. Ethan tensed automatically, but Derek raised his hands in a placating gesture. "I'm not here to start anything," he said, his voice lacking its usual arrogance. "What do you want then?" Ethan asked. Wary but calm, Derek looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "Look, what happened in the bathroom, it went too far. The choking thing, that was messed up. You could have really hurt me," Ethan said simply. Derek nodded, still not meeting Ethan's eyes. "Yeah, I know that now." He finally looked up. "Anyway, we're backing off. Not just you, everyone." "Good," Ethan said. After a moment, he added, "I meant what I said about knowing how to control myself. I've never used my training to hurt anyone outside of a tournament. I don't plan to start." "Yeah, well, let's hope it doesn't come to that," Derek said. He hesitated, then stuck out his hand. "No hard feelings?" Ethan considered the outstretched hand, remembering all the humiliation and pain of the past 3 months. It would be easy to reject the gesture, to hold on to the anger, but that wasn't who he wanted to be. He took Derek's hand and shook it once, firmly. "Clean slate," he said. As Derek walked away, Ethan felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He finished organizing his locker and headed for the exit, where he found Sophia waiting. "Was that Derek Walsh actually talking to you like a normal human being?" she asked, falling into step beside him. "Stranger things have happened," Ethan replied with a small smile. "Like the quiet new kid turning out to be a secret martial arts master?" Sophia bumped his shoulder playfully. "Come on, a group of us are going to that new ice cream place. You should join." Ethan hesitated. 3 months ago, hell, even a week ago, he would have declined automatically, retreating to the safety of home rather than risking social interaction. But things were different now. He was different. "Sure," he said, "I'd like that." As they walked out into the bright afternoon sunshine, Ethan reflected on how quickly everything had changed. The bullies who had made his life miserable were now avoiding him. The isolation he had felt was beginning to crack as new connections formed. And most importantly, he had discovered that standing up for himself didn't mean becoming a bully in return. It meant finding the balance between power and restraint, between defending yourself and maintaining your principles. His father had been right all along. Self-defense wasn't just about fighting back when someone threw a punch. It was about knowing your worth and refusing to let anyone diminish it. It was about finding the courage to be yourself, even when that made you a target. And sometimes it was about showing others exactly what you were capable of, not to hurt them, but to earn their respect.